The last of her kind, the wind howled across the empty wasteland of Telerini. Dust blew like smoke through the broken trees and metal ruins. In the middle of it all, hidden beneath a half-buried escape pod, a small alien girl sat with her arms wrapped around her knees. Her name was Jaria, and she was alone. Her skin was pale blue, marked with old scars and bruises. Her clothes were torn, and her eyes looked tired, too tired for someone so young. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the water from the crashed pod's tank was almost gone. She stared at the sky through a crack in the pod's wall. Every night, she hoped a ship would appear, not the ones that took her people, not the ones that dropped bombs and fire, but someone, anyone who could help. Her small fingers clutched a round stone she had found, smooth and cool. She liked to imagine it was her sister's hand. Her sister had been taken the day the soldiers came. Jaria had run and hidden in the woods, just like her father told her. She had waited for hours, then days, but no one came back. No voices, no footsteps, just silence and smoke. That was 5 weeks ago. Since then, she had only seen animals on one hunter ship that flew overhead but didn't stop. She stayed hidden, always afraid they would come for her too, and maybe they would have, if not for what happened next. It began with a strange sound, a low hum, like the sky itself was humming. Jaria sat up, eyes wide. Something was landing. She crawled to the top of the wrecked pod and peeked through a gap. Far away, beyond the broken hills, she saw fire. No, not fire. A ship's engine, a small ship, shaped like a teardrop, landed on the hard ground with a hiss of steam. Jaria's heart raced. Was it the hunters again? Or someone worse? She watched for what felt like forever, barely breathing. Then the ship's door opened, and a figure stepped out, tall, covered in dust, with gear strapped to his back. Not a monster, not an alien, a human. Jaria froze. She had heard stories of humans. Some called them dangerous, some called them kind, but she had never seen one with her own eyes. He looked around slowly, one hand over his eyes to block the sun. Then he started walking right toward her crash site. Panic rose in her chest. She ducked back into the pod, heart thumping like a drum. She grabbed the stick she used as a weapon. Though it wouldn't stop much, footsteps came closer, crunching on the dry ground, then silence. The human had stopped. Jaria peeked out again and saw him standing just a few steps away. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't shouting or searching. He just stood there, staring at the broken pod, his face quiet and sad. Then he did something that made her freeze. He slowly knelt down, took off his backpack, and reached inside. Jaria's hands tightened on her stick, ready to swing, but the human only pulled out a metal box. He opened it and placed something on the ground. Food, wrapped in silver, soft and steaming. Then he stepped back. Jaria didn't move. The human sat down a few feet away, crossed his legs, and looked up at the sky. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He just waited. Minutes passed. Jaria's stomach growled loudly. The smell of the food drifted to her nose, warm, savory, like roasted grain and meat. Slowly, carefully, she crept out of the pod, never taking her eyes off the human. He didn't look at her. He just stayed still, like a statue. She snatched the food, ran back, and sat in the corner of the pod. She ate quickly, tears in her eyes, not just from hunger, but because for the first time in weeks, someone had seen her. Someone had offered kindness. When she finished, she peeked out again. The human was still there. This time, he looked at her and gave a small smile. Then he spoke a word she didn't understand, but the way he said it didn't sound like a command. It sounded like hope. Jaria didn't know who he was or why he was here, but something in her chest told her this man was not like the others. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Asterisk, the fire crackled softly in the dark. Jeria sat across from the human. Her knees tucked under her chin. The heat from the flames warmed her cold skin. But the fear in her heart still stayed. She watched him closely, ready to run if he moved too fast. The human Callan, she had learned his name was quiet. He pointed to himself earlier and said, Callan then pointed to her and waited. She had whispered Jeria for the first time since the attack. His face had softened at the sound of it, like it meant something to him. Now, he sat in silence as stars filled the sky above. Jeria had never seen a human this close before. His face was rough, with a short beard and eyes that looked tired. But kind, he had no weapons in his hands, only tools and food. He didn't try to take anything, didn't shout, didn't hurt her. He just stayed. She dozed off near the fire, the warmth finally pulling her into sleep. But deep into the night, something changed. There was a sound, a low growl. Jerry's eyes snapped open. The fire was dim now, just embers glowing in the ash. Callan was asleep, lying on his side, one arm under his head. The growl came again closer, deeper. Her heart jumped into her throat. She turned slowly, and her blood ran cold. A large, dark beast stood at the edge of the firelight. Its fur was black and tangled. Its eyes bright and yellow. It moved like a shadow, quiet and deadly. Jeria froze, her whole body shaking. The creature sniffed the air and stepped forward. Toward Callan, she looked at him, still sleeping, unaware. The beast was just a few feet away. Jeria reached for the stick beside her, hands trembling. She didn't think, didn't plan, she just moved. With a scream, she threw the stick at the beast's head. The wooden branch hit its side. Not hard, but enough. The creature turned, snarling, now focused on her. Callan woke with a start, eyes wide, grabbing for something, anything. Jeria? He shouted, his voice sharp with fear. She backed away as the beast lunged, teeth flashing in the firelight. But Callan was faster. He rolled across the ground, grabbed a burning log from the fire, swung it with both hands. Flames burst through the air, striking the creature's side. It yelped and turned, limping into the dark. Vanishing into the trees, silence returned, broken only by Jeria's heavy breathing. She was shaking all over, her legs weak. Callan rushed to her side, kneeling. In the dirt, he looked at her, eyes full of worry, and placed a hand gently on her arm. She didn't pull away. You okay? He asked, even though he knew she didn't understand. Still, she nodded slowly, her voice too soft to speak. He smiled just a little, then stood and checked the edge of the trees. The beast was gone for now. The fire was rebuilt, brighter this time. Jeria sat closer to Callan now, not as afraid. He handed her a new stick, stronger, sharpened at the end. She took it in both hands, her grip firm. He showed her how to hold it, how to swing it if danger came again. They couldn't speak the same words, but tonight they spoke the same fear, the same courage. As the night went on, Jeria looked at Callan with new eyes. He had protected her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. She remembered the stories her people told about humans, that they were wild, greedy, dangerous. But this one had offered food, shelter, safety. He had risked his life for hers. She wondered what he was doing here on this broken world. Was he lost too? Was he searching for someone? Callan sat beside her, watching the flames. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, a round metal disc, smooth and shiny. He pressed it, and a tiny image appeared in the air. Jeria gasped softly. It was a picture to humans. A man and a young girl. The girl looked a little like her, but with brown skin and dark eyes. They were smiling, holding hands. Standing in front of a glowing tree, Callan stared at the image for a long time, then turned it off and put it away. Jeria, Didn't ask who the girl was, but deep inside, something told her that Callan had lost someone too. Maybe that's why he stayed, why he cared. Because they were both broken, both alone, the fire burned low again. But this time, Jeria didn't feel so cold. She leaned her head gently against Callan's arm. Eyes closing, he didn't move away. He just sat there, still and calm, like a wall she could lean on without fear. And for the first time since her world ended, Jeria didn't feel like the last of her kind. She felt safe. The sun rose slowly over Tellerine. Its pale light crept across the dry hills and shattered stone. Jeria stood at the edge of a broken ridge, looking down into the wreckage of an old ship. It wasn't hers. This one was bigger, older, and half-buried in the ground, but Callan said it might have something important, something that could change everything. They had walked for hours to reach it. Jeria followed Callan's lead, climbing over rocks and twisted metal. She was stronger now, not the frightened girl hiding in the pod, and Callan. He still didn't talk much, but he smiled more now. They moved like a team, but neither of them knew what they would find inside. The air smelled like rust and dust. The ship's metal walls groaned when Callan pushed open the hatch. Inside, shadows stretched across old corridors. Broken lights flickered above their heads. Jeria held her sharpened stick tight, ready for anything. Callan walked ahead with his small light. Sweeping it across the walls, he stopped at a door marked with faded writing. "Control room," he said softly. More to himself than her, he pulled out a tool and worked on the panel. It sparked once, then popped open. The door slid aside with a sharp hiss. Inside was a room filled with dust and silence. Screens lined the walls, all dead. Buttons, levers, wires, everything old and silent. Jeria stepped inside and looked around, her eyes wide. Then Callan knelt near a broken console and wiped the dust away. Underneath it, half crushed, was a beacon and emergency comm unit. Jeria gasped. She had seen one before. Back in her old village, it could send a signal across the stars. Call for rescue. Her heart beat faster. Could this be the way off this world? Callan stared at the device, lips pressed tight. He touched it gently, then opened a side panel. Inside, wires were snapped, and a power cell was missing. It was broken, but not impossible to fix. Jeria watched him silently, hope rising and fear following close behind. Hours passed. Callan worked without stopping. Hands dirty, forehead wet with sweat. Jeria helped where she could, passing him tools, holding lights. Finally, he sat back and sighed. The beacon hummed a weak, shaky sound but alive. A small green light blinked, slow and steady. Jeria's heart jumped. "It works," she whispered. Even though he couldn't understand her words, she smiled at him, and he smiled back. But then he reached for the final switch, the one that would send the signal, and suddenly her smile faded. If he sent the signal, someone might come. They might rescue him, take him back to his world, but not her. No one was coming for her. Her people were gone, her home destroyed. If Callan left, she would be alone again. She turned away. Walking to the edge of the broken ship, the wind blew softly over the ruins. Her hands clenched at her sides, her chest heavy. She had just started to feel safe. She didn't want to lose it all again. Behind her, she heard the beacon beep once, then stop. She turned slowly. Heart pounding, Callan stood there, looking at the switch, his hand still hovering over it. He hadn't pressed it. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. Then, he stepped back and sat down without sending the signal. Jeria blinked, confused. He pulled something from his bag and set it on the floor, 2 metal cups and a heat pod. He poured warm liquid into one and held it out to her, a silent message. "I'm not leaving." She took the cup with shaking hands, then sat beside him. No words were needed. In that moment, she understood the beacon could wait. Right now, they had each other, and that was more important than anything in the stars. Later that night, they built a small camp beside the wreck. The beacon's light still blinked faintly. A quiet promise, Jeria looked up at the stars, wondering who else might hear it. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't hoping for rescue. She was hoping time would slow down, that this quiet moment would never end. Callan sat nearby. Sharpening a piece of metal into a knife, Jeria worked on fixing a small solar lamp, her fingers moving with care. They didn't need words. Not when actions spoke louder, not when silence felt like peace. They were two broken lives stuck on a forgotten world, but maybe, just maybe, together they could become whole again. The sky cracked with thunder. But there were no clouds, no lightning, no storm. Only fire, a trail of red and gold, tearing across the sky like a burning arrow. Jeria dropped the piece of fruit she was peeling. Callan looked up from his tools, his hand freezing midair. They both stared at the falling ship as it screamed through the clouds. Then, silence. A loud boom followed, shaking the ground under their feet. Birds scattered from the trees, and dust rose over the hills. Jeria's chest tightened. Her body frozen. It wasn't a meteor. It was a landing, but not the kind you hope for. Callan grabbed his bag, quickly checking his knife and tools. He looked at Jeria and gave her a firm nod. She understood they had to see who it was, or more. Importantly, what they moved quickly but quietly, sticking to the trees. Jeria's heart beat fast in her ears. She remembered the stories of ships like that, not human, not friendly, hunters. As they reached the ridge above the crash site, Jeria dropped to her knees. Callan crouched beside her, eyes narrowed below them. The ship sat like a dark insect, sleek and sharp. Its engines hissed with leftover heat. But it hadn't crashed. It had landed perfectly. With purpose, the doors opened, and two figures stepped out, tall, armored, with long rifles slung across their backs. One had a skull mask, the other a breathing tank. They moved like predators, slow and sure. Jeria felt the air leave her lungs. She had seen those kinds before. The same kind that took her people. The same kind that burned her village. Callan pulled her back behind a large rock. His eyes were calm, but his grip on his knife was tight. Jeria shook her head, whispering, "We need to go." But it was too late. A drone buzzed above the trees, one of theirs. It scanned the area with a soft blue light, and it turned directly toward them. "Run," Callan whispered, his voice sharp and low. Jeria hesitated, but his eyes told her everything. She bolted into the trees, her feet barely touching the ground behind her. She heard the crack of plasma fire. Trees exploded around them. Leaves turned to ash. Callan was right behind her, dodging blasts. Throwing smoke bombs from his belt, the forest turned into chaos. They reached the edge of an old bunker, a metal shelter half buried in the earth. Callan pulled her inside and slammed the door. The sounds of the forest went quiet, muffled behind steel. Jeria collapsed against the wall. Gasping, Callan knelt and checked her quickly. No wounds, just fear. Then he smiled, just a little. They were alive for now. The bunker was cold and dark. Dust covered the walls, and broken machines hummed softly. But it would hide them for a while. Callan sat down, pulling off his gear. He touched a wound on his shoulder, but not deep. Jeria moved to him and tore part of her cloth to press against it. He winced, but didn't stop her. She wanted to say something, wanted to tell him thank you, that she was scared, that he didn't have to protect her, but all she could do was press her hand to his, and he nodded, like he understood every word she didn't speak. Hours passed. Above them, the hunters searched. Their footsteps echoed through the trees, and their drones buzzed through the air. But they didn't find the bunker, not yet. Inside, Callan fixed his weapon, turning parts and whispering to himself. Jeria stared at the ceiling, wondering why they came. Why now? Suddenly, a thought hit her like a stone. The beacon, they must have picked up the signal. Someone had heard it, but not the ones they wanted. They had sent a call for help, and monsters had answered. She told Callan with her hands, drawing shapes. Pointing at the sky, he frowned, then nodded slowly. The beacon had to be destroyed, no more signals, no more danger, but the damage was already done. The hunters were here now, and they didn't leave survivors. That night, Jeria couldn't sleep. She sat by the bunker door, gripping her weapon tight. Callan slept lightly, one eye half open. They were trapped, hunted, and outnumbered, but they were also something else. They were together, and for Jeria, that meant they still had a chance. The wind screamed across the trees like a warning. Dark clouds rolled over Tellarinine's sky, heavy and low. The animals had already vanished. The birds silent, Jeria stood at the edge of the old bunker, staring up at the storm that was coming, but her thoughts were somewhere else, not in the sky. But inside Callan's bag, while he slept, Jeria had searched it. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she needed to know more. More about the man who had saved her, protected her, and stayed. She didn't expect to find that picture. It was a small photo, worn and folded. In it, a human girl smiled at the camera. Standing next to Callan, her smile was wide, her hair tied back, and her face full of light. But what stopped Jeria's breath was how much the girl looked like her. Not exactly, but close enough. Same small face, same curious eyes, same quiet smile. The girl even wore a necklace shaped like a moon jest like Jeria's. The one her sister had given her before the invasion. Jeria's fingers trembled as she held the photo, her mind filled with questions. Was that why Callan helped her? Was she just a shadow of someone he lost? Not real to him, not truly her. She tucked the photo back into the bag, heart heavy. When Callan woke, she didn't speak to him. She avoided his eyes. Moved around him like a ghost. He noticed, but didn't ask. Not yet. Outside, the storm grew closer. Lightning cracked across the sky like the world was tearing apart. Rain began to fall, cold and fast. They sealed the bunker doors and lit the lamps, but the air between them felt colder than the wind outside. Callan finally broke the silence. "Jeria," he said softly. She didn't look at him. Instead, she pressed her hands together and asked with her eyes, "Why?" He saw the question in her face, and he understood. He reached into his bag and pulled out the photo, holding it gently. He looked at it for a long time, then handed it to her without a word. She took it, stared at the girl's face, then at his. Her hands shook again. "That's my sister," Callan said slowly. He pointed at the girl, then pointed at himself. "She was taken," he whispered. "A long time ago." Jeria's eyes filled with tears. "She didn't want to fall," he continued, voice low and rough. "I couldn't save her." The storm roared. Above them, thunder crashing like gunfire. Jeria closed her eyes, breathing hard. So he had lost someone, and she did remind him of her, but not in the way she feared. Callan placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and warm. He pointed to her, Jeria, then touched his own heart. "You," he said clearly, "are not her." Jeria looked up at him, lips trembling. "You are you," he said again, pressing her name into the air with his hand. The words weren't perfect, but the meaning was. Jeria stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. She cried, not just for the girl in the photo, not just for herself, but for both of them. For what they had lost and what they had found. The bunker shook as wind slammed against it. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. But they didn't move. They sat together in the dark, leaning into each other, two souls broken. By war, holding each other against the storm. Later, Callan showed her a map scratched onto a screen with blinking lights. He pointed to a far zone marked in red, a place he had avoided before, but now he believed it might have answers. A crashed human relay station, still sending signals. Maybe there was more tech there. Maybe even a way to find help or truth. Jeria agreed, her fear now mixed with fire. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The hunters were still out there, and sooner or later, the bunker wouldn't be enough. They had to move together. The storm passed by morning. The ground was wet. The air sharp and clean. They packed their supplies, fixed their gear, and stepped into the wild once again. The photo stayed in Callan's bag. But now, it didn't stand between them. It was part of the journey, part of why they walked, but not who they were, as they headed toward the red zone. Jeria felt something new in her chest. Not just fear, not just hope, but strength. Her past was gone, her people lost, but her future. It was still being written, and she would not face it alone. Asterisk smoke rose in the distance, dark and steady like a warning flag. Callan and Jeria crouched behind a fallen tree, staring at the red zone ahead. The crashed relay tower stood in the center of the valley, half buried in dirt and vines. It looked like a broken spine, cracked and bleeding wires. But what made Jeria's blood turn cold was the ship parked beside it, sleek, black. With sharp fins and heavy guns, the hunters were already there. Jeria touched her side where her moon-shaped necklace rested beneath her shirt. She could feel it pulsing against her skin. Like it knew this place. Like it remembered what she had lost. This wasn't just another fight. This was the fight, the one that would decide everything. Callan checked his gear. Smoke bombs, sharp knives, one old plasma cutter. Not much, but it was enough for him. He looked at Jeria, his eyes asking the silent question, "Are you ready?" Jeria nodded, but inside her chest, her heart pounded like a war drum. They moved through the trees like shadows, quiet, careful, using every rock and root for cover. Jeria felt the ground shift beneath her feet, like the planet itself was holding its breath. The wind stopped, the birds stayed quiet. Only the crackle of the tower's damaged combs filled the air, like whispers from ghosts as they reached the edge of the valley. Callan paused. He pulled out a small screen, showing heat signatures, 3 hunter guards. 1 inside the relay tower, 2 walking patrols. Jeria studied the pattern, the way they moved. Their armor was strong, but their pride made them slow. They didn't expect a fight from the ones they hunted. But that would be their mistake. They waited until one of the guards moved near the trees. Then, like lightning, Callan jumped, grabbing the enemy from behind and pulling him into the shadows. No scream, no shot, just silence. Jeria's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen him move that fast before, but this time she didn't hide. She followed. The next guard turned and saw her too late. Jeria swung her staff, hitting the side of his leg. He dropped, roaring in pain. Callan finished him with a sharp strike from behind. Jeria didn't flinch this time. She felt the fire inside her now bright and real. She was done being hunted. But then, the alarm rang. A sharp wail from the tower that echoed across the hills. The last hunter inside had seen them on the screen. A blast came from the tower window, barely missing Jeria's head. They ducked behind cover as red lasers burned into the ground. Callan pulled her down and handed her the smoke bomb. "Throw," he said, and pointed high. Jeria nodded and tossed it with all her strength. The bomb burst midair, spilling thick smoke over the tower's front. Under cover, they ran. Callan kicked open the old side hatch and pushed Jeria through. Inside, sparks fell from broken lights. A hallway stretched into the dark. Lined with shattered screens and flashing wires, the final hunter waited at the end, taller, stronger, wearing a red-marked helmet. The leader, he raised his weapon, ready to fire. But Jeria stepped forward, lifting her necklace from under her shirt. It glowed brighter than ever before. The hunter hesitated. Jeria didn't. She threw it toward the center console. As it flew, it sparked like lightning. It hit the console and melted into it. Suddenly, the tower trembled. The walls lit up with glowing symbols of her people. The station's defense system had awakened. A loud pulse echoed through the metal. The hunter screamed as his weapons sparked and shattered in his hands. A blue beam burst from the wall. Striking him square in the chest, he fell backward, armor cracking, motionless. Jeria fell to her knees, chest heaving. The glow faded slowly, but the tower was alive. Again, her people had left something behind after all. Something only she could activate. Something only she could be. Callan ran to her. Pulling her into a tight hug, they didn't speak. They didn't have to. Jeria had saved them both. Not with luck, not by hiding, but by standing tall, outside. The smoke cleared. The hunter's ship powered down. Shut off by the tower system, the beacon inside the relay began to blink, this time with a new code. A message, not for hunters, but for allies. Jeria looked up at the stars. Her face streaked with sweat and dust, but her eyes were bright, filled with something new power. She was no longer just the last of her kind. She was a fighter, a protector, and a symbol of what remained. And Callan. He stood beside her. Proud, silent, unshaken. Together, they had won this fight, but the final choice still waited ahead. The tower was silent now. The lights had faded, the defenses were still. Smoke drifted from the valley, rising into a sky that was finally clear. Jeria sat at the top of the broken structure. Legs pulled close to her chest, below her. Callan was checking the last signal from the beacon, and far above them, a shape moved through the stars. A rescue ship was coming. The human ship had responded fast, faster than expected. The beacon's message was clean, strong, and unmistakable. Coordinates locked. 2 life forms found. 1 human, 1 not. Jeria stared at the blinking light on the console. It pulsed like a heartbeat. A promise or a question. She didn't speak as Callan climbed up beside her. He handed her water. Then looked at the sky with tired eyes. "They'll be here in less than an hour," he said softly. Jeria didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the stars, but her mind was lost in thoughts. Would they take her? Would they let someone like her walk on a human ship? She had seen how some humans looked at other species with fear, with hate, and she wasn't special. She was just a girl with a scarred past, and a necklace that no longer glowed. But then Callan spoke again. "I told them, I'm not leaving." "Without you," he said. Jeria turned, surprised. He wasn't smiling. Wasn't joking, he meant it. Every word. He pointed to the sky, then to her. "Home," he said. Then placed his hand on his chest. "Is not a place." Then he pointed to her again. "It's a person." Jeria didn't know how to reply. Her throat felt tight. Her hands shook just a little. But her heart, that same heart that had once only known fear, felt full. Full of something new. Something strong. Hope. They packed their things slowly. There wasn't much, just what they could carry. Memories made from scraps, from fire, from shared silence. As they walked to the open landing field, the wind picked up, soft and warm. Jeria looked back only once at the tower, the smoke, the ruins, at the place where she had become someone new. The rescue ship came down gently, its engines humming low. The doors opened with a hiss, and a clean light poured out. 3 figures stood there, humans, dressed in dark blue suits with white emblems. Their faces were curious, not cold, but still cautious. Callan stepped forward and spoke first. "This is Jeria," he said. "She's with me." One of the crew members raised an eyebrow. "A Talari." Jeria tensed. That word, her people's name, felt heavy now, like a forgotten song. "Yes," Callan said, his voice firm. The last one? There was a pause. Then the lead officer looked at Jaria and asked, "Do you want to come with us?" Garia opened her mouth, but no sound came. She looked at Callan, then at the open door of the ship, then at the planet around Hertha, dead trees, the ruined skies, the silence, and finally she nodded. Inside the ship, everything was clean, and yet Bright Jiria felt small again at first, like she didn't belong, but Callan never left her side. Not for a second. He showed her how to strap into the seat, how to breathe slow during takeoff. He kept his hand close to hers, just in case she needed it. As the engines lifted them into the stars, Jiria watched the planet shrink. Tellarine, her graveyard, her prison, her battlefield, but no longer her home. The stars welcomed them like old friends. And as the ship turned toward Earth, Jiria leaned, her head on Callan's shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because in that quiet moment, far away from everything she had lost, she finally understood what he had meant. Home wasn't where you were born. Home was where someone waited for you, someone who stayed even when the sky was falling. And for the first time in her life, Jiria felt truly found.